There are many people in this world who are dissatisfied with their current situation, and Sun Hu is one of them. In a small town in Fujian, Sun Hu used to live an ordinary and stable life, but he fantasized about another life. He heard that a month's salary in the United States could be equivalent to 7 months' salary in China, where the cost of living is low and there are many opportunities. So he decided to take his wife Wang Zihu and 5-year-old daughter, Run, on a shortcut to happiness and sneak into the United States. However, he never thought that this so-called shortcut would lead them into a nightmare, and the happiness he pursued would eventually become an unbearable price. Sun, who is a 30-year-old Fujian guy, in August last year, because he read too many online comments about high wages and low consumption in foreign countries, Sun Hu also had the idea of working illegally in the United States. Because he couldn't bear to leave his wife and 5-year-old daughter, Sun Hu decided to take them to the United States illegally through the line. Childhood friend of Sun Hu is a senior guide for the route, so Sun Hu contacted him immediately. When he learned that Sun Hu is going to the United States with his family, he advised Sun Hu earnestly, "Sun Hu, you have a good life in China. Why do you want to do this risky business? Listen to my advice. Don't think too much of foreign countries. Let's not talk about how dangerous the route is. Even if you go to the United States, your life may not be as good as in China." Now think about it. If Sun Hu had listened to Chen Lei at that time, she would be living a peaceful life now. But at that time, Sun Hu had been brainwashed by the remarks of those public intellectuals. She only knew that 1 month's salary in the United States was equivalent to Sun Hu's 7 months of work in China. So Sun Hu firmly expressed his determination to go to the United States. There was no other way, so Chen Lei asked Sun Hu to apply for a tourist visa to Turkey first, and then buy a ticket to Quito Airport in Ecuador. After arriving in Quito, he would pick them up at the airport. After getting Chen Lei's reply, the family of 3 began to get busy nervously. Sun Hu and his wife quit their jobs, exchanged all their savings into US dollars, packed up some of their luggage and boarded a plane to Turkey. At Istanbul Airport in Turkey, the family slept at the airport for 3 days before finally waiting for a plane to Quito. After landing at Quito Airport in Ecuador with a free visa, all subsequent actions are considered illegal smuggling. At the airport, they met Chen Lei, and after saying hello, Chen Lei began to introduce the next actions to Sun Hu and his wife. They are about to go north to Colombia, pass through Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and other Central American countries, and then enter Mexico, and then look for an opportunity to illegally enter the United States. Along the way, they will cross 9 countries, and it is expected to take 80 days to reach the United States. When Sun Hu's wife Wang Ziyu heard this, a look of fear appeared on her face. "It will take so long?" Chen Lei comforted her. "Don't worry, sister-in-law. I basically take this road 2 or 3 times a year. Just follow me and I will definitely take you to the United States safely." After a short rest in Quito, Chen Lei drove them to Tulcan, the border between Ecuador and Colombia, and then drove directly to Medellin, the second largest city in Colombia. When crossing the border, Sun Hu and his wife were very nervous, thinking that it would be like in the movies. There were a large number of police and troops guarding the border, but, to their surprise, the journey from Ecuador to Colombia was very smooth. They didn't see a single policeman on the road, let alone border inspection. It was as simple as if they were not going abroad, but leaving the province. Seeing the 2 of them nervous, Chen Lei said to them with a smile while smoking a cigarette, "Don't worry. In fact, there are only 4 big obstacles in this route. One is how to go abroad, one is how to land in Ecuador, one is how to cross the Darien Canyon, and the last one is how to cross the entire Mexico. The remaining countries are not a problem to cross the border. At most, it will cost a little money." Sun Hu nodded, not knowing how dangerous the journey behind was. After Chen Lei found a hotel in Medellin for his family of 3, he began to go out frequently. The family was unfamiliar with the place and could only stay in a 5-square-meter hotel, waiting anxiously every day. The hotel had no air conditioning, only fans. Sun Hu's daughter Run cried constantly because of the heat. At night, mosquitoes bit her and she had a big lump. Sun Hu and his wife had to take turns to hit mosquitoes every night and couldn't sleep well. After waiting for a week, Shenlei finally took them out again, but this time there were 8 more people in their team. Only 3 of them were Chinese, and the remaining 5 were black. Shenlei said that among the 3 Chinese from Haiti, there was an old couple in their 50s and a young girl in her 20s. Everyone was more cautious about strangers, so they just nodded and didn't talk too much. After everyone was together, Shenlei took them from Medellin overnight to Nek Akal, a small border town between Colombia and Panama. In Nek Akal, they rested for another week. Shenlei told them that they were about to enter Panama, and the third largest Darien Canyon on the road was there. They needed to hike over the Darien jungle before they continue the journey. This journey was very dangerous, and countless people died in the Darien Canyon every year. They were asked to be mentally prepared and buy equipment and supplies for the Darien Canyon. Sun, who and his wife bought a lot of food, a tent, 3 raincoats, crutches, rain boots, and mosquito repellent spray. One night, a week later, Shenlei took them to a boat stop on the Colombian border. The family of 3 and more than 20 other people squeezed into a small boat that was only 2 meters wide and 5 meters long, and took advantage of the night to go to the Mount and Earring Point in Panama. The wind waves were particularly strong at night, and the boat sailed on the sea as if it would be hit into the sea by the waves at any time. Run was afraid and kept crying in Sun Hu's arms. Sun Hu hugged him and held his wife with heartache, praying silently in his heart that he could get ashore safely. After more than 2 hours of sailing, they finally got ashore safely. Not long after, twice Shenlei told Sun, who with a look of fear, that a boat behind them capsized and for people were drowned on the spot. Sun, who and his wife were so scared that they broke out in a cold sweat. This was the closest they had ever been to death. There was a small camp on the shore, and dozens of people were waiting outside the camp. These were the walking groups waiting to set off. Shenlei asked them to find a place to sleep first, and to set off immediately at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning when the sun came out to start walking. While setting up the tent, Sun Hu observed the walking groups around him. There were people from all countries and races in these walking groups, and many of them were like Sun Hu, walking to the United States with their families. After a night's rest, Shenlei woke them up at 6 in the morning. Let's go. After Sun Hu and his wife quickly packed up their things, Sun Hu hugged her still sleeping daughter and followed the main group to start walking. There were hundreds of people in the walking group that set off with them in the morning, and Shenlei lead the others in front. Experienced guides like him charge a lot of money. Just leading the group out of the Darien Gorge costs $100 per person. Shenlei was leading dozens of other people, so he couldn't take care of their speed. As they walked, Sun Hu could no longer see him. The Darien Gorge is a lush tropical rainforest, surrounded by tall trees. The climate is humid and hot. The road they walked on was full of mud. If you walk on the mud, it is as thick as the sole of your foot. Every step is very difficult. The road is very slippery. There is a bottomless canyon at your feet. If you fall into it, you will be dead. You have to be very careful every step. The most uncomfortable thing is the dense gossips around. There is a kind of very small mosquito. It is itchy and painful to bite the body. A bite will cause a blister that will not heal for several days. It is very scary. The way up the mountain is very long. Sun Hu held her daughter and carried the tent on her back, and soon she couldn't walk anymore. People from the surrounding walking groups kept overtaking them, which made them feel anxious. If they fell behind in such a place, they would really die. During this time, Sun Hu also saw the group of black people who had met with them in Midland before. One of them was carrying the young Chinese woman on his back. They were talking and laughing along the way and soon passed them. Sun Hu didn't know how they got together, but judging from the situation, the woman should be able to walk out of the rainforest easily. After walking for another half an hour, Sun Hu and his wife couldn't hold on any longer, so they found a stone to rest and ate something to replenish their energy. Sun Hu heard a low cry from the bushes behind them. Sun Hu and his wife looked back and saw that it was the group of black people and the Chinese woman. Sun Hu's wife only took a look, then turned her head with a red face and whispered, "Pooh, how shameless." Sun Hu also frowned as she watched. This woman was really cruel. With 5 black people, she would be busy for a while. They were afraid that Run would see this, so they changed places to rest. After resting for an hour, they started walking along the muddy road again, but they were already far behind the main group. Seeing that it was getting dark, they still couldn't catch up with the main group. Sun Hu and his wife were a little scared. At this time, several Venezuelans carrying luggage suddenly ran towards them in panic. While running, they shouted words that Sun Hu couldn't understand. Sun Hu and his wife were frightened. Sun Hu subconsciously hugged his wife and children idly and yelled at them, "What's wrong? What happened?" Unfortunately, they didn't understand what Sun Hu said. He was about to run with his wife and children to follow them. There was a burst of gunfire behind them. Dozens of men in military uniforms shot at them with guns. Sun Hu quickly protected his wife under him. His heart was beating wildly and his feet were shaking. A Venezuelan man next to Sun Hu was shot. He lay on the ground and wailed. The police rushed over quickly, arrested all of them, snatched their luggage, and took them back. A few dozen minutes later, they came to a simple military camp. There were probably less than 100 soldiers here, but they were all armed. The more than 10 people who were captured were taken into a small concrete house. As soon as she walked in, Sun Hu smelled a strong smell of blood. There were some bloody knives scattered on the ground, and there were dried blood on the ground. The walls were also covered with dense light smoke, which made Sun Hu feel cold. Sun Hu was pressed against the wall by the police, and she was forced to take off her clothes and began to search her body. They held a shotgun against Sun Hu's lower back. Sun Hu was trembling with fear and did not dare to resist at all. After searching Sun Hu's back, the police searched the bodies of others. Regardless of whether they were men or women, everyone was forcibly stripped of their clothes. Sun Hu watched with her own eyes as they wrapped a Venezuelan woman naked, and then searched out more than $200 from her underwear. Afterwards, the police insulted him directly in front of all of them. Sun Hu and his wife's faces turned pale. The next moment, two policemen pressed Sun Hu's wife against the wall and forcibly took off her clothes. As soon as one of the policemen took off Sun Hu's wife's top, the $1,900 that Sun Hu had hidden in his wife's chest fell to the ground. The policeman picked up the dollars on the ground excitedly and laughed. Another policeman was about to continue to take off Sun Hu's wife's pants. Sun Hu was so anxious that he knelt directly in front of the two policemen, cowed out and begged them, "Please let my wife go. I have given you all my money. We have no money left. Please be kind and let my wife go." Run Run was also scared and hid behind him and cried. The whole family cried like a tearful person. But the police did not stop, but became more excited. They pushed Sun Hu's wife down in front of Sun Hu and pointed to black gun muzzles at Sun Hu and his wife's heads. Sun Hu's eyes were red, and he couldn't believe what was happening in front of him. Sun Hu closed his eyes in pain and couldn't bear to see what they did to his wife. Sun Hu's ears were filled with his wife's painful wails, Run Run's scared cries, and the police's wanton laughter. Sun Hu really couldn't imagine that the police in Panama would be so bad. After an unknown amount of time, they finally stopped and locked the dozen of them in a big dark room. Sun Hu hugged his wife's scarred body and put clothes on her. "I'm sorry, my wife. I'm sorry. I'm not a man. I shouldn't have brought you here to walk the line. My wife, Run Run, it's me who made you suffer." Sun Hu cried and apologized to his wife. But his wife, Huang Xian, who didn't say a word, just silently shed tears. After they stayed in the big dark room in fear for a whole night, at noon the next day, the police finally took the family of 3 out of the big dark room to Sun Hu. Sun Hu looked up and saw that it was Chen Lei who came to find them. After Sun Hu saw Chen Lei gave the police several $100s, a policeman threw out their 708 scattered luggage, and they didn't even have time to pack their luggage. Chen Lei hurriedly pulled Sun Hu away from the camp. On the way back, Sun Hu said to Chen Lei painfully, "These Panamanian police are simply beasts." Chen Lei sneered and said, "They're not Panamanian police, but a group of bandits in military uniforms. No one is in charge here, so these people gather here and kidnap people who go through the line from here. It's my fault that I didn't notice that you fell behind. You must follow closely next time." Sun Hu nodded silently and grabbed his wife's hand. Sun Hu is now very worried about his wife, Huang's mental state. He has not said a word since last night, and the whole person looks dazed. On the way to the boarding point with Chen Lei, they found the body of the Chinese woman who had followed the group of black people in a pit on the side of the road. He was naked, covered in filth, and his neck was black and blue. It might be that the group of black people accidentally killed him. Chen just cursed in a low voice after seeing it, and then pulled them to quickly pass his body, but the body gave Sun Hu a huge blow. In the subsequent hiking, no matter how painful and tired they were, they did not rest again. In the evening of the second day, they arrived at the boarding point, and at this moment there were still hundreds of people walking the line. Chen pointed to the river and said to them, "We will take this boat at night, and after registering at the refugee camp on the other side, the Panamanian police will send us to the border of Costa Rica. After crossing the Darien Canyon, the road behind will be much easier." Sun Hu nodded. Her expectations for the United States had long disappeared. Sun Hu even wanted to return home immediately, but they had no way out. After resting until 1, they called them to get up and prepare to cross the river. The boat was still the same canoe they had made before. There were only a dozen life jackets on the boat, but there were more than 30 people. Unfortunately, none of their family members got a life jacket. They huddled at the stern of the boat, with Sun Hu holding Ren one hand and pulling their remaining luggage with the other. His wife and Chen were sitting next to Sun Hu. When crossing the river, the water was very turbulent, and the boat kept spinning, and there was a possibility of capsizing at any time. They drove for more than an hour without any danger. Just when they could see the lights of the refugee camp opposite, their boat suddenly seemed to hit something uncapsized directly. After falling into the water, Sun Hu immediately floated to the surface holding Run. Sun Hu looked around for his wife's voice and shouted her name, Huang Zihu. But the light was too dim, the water was too turbulent, and there were many people, so Sun Hu couldn't see Huang Zihu at all. Run kept crying, and Sun Hu had no choice but to swim to the shore with Run in her arms. After selling Run down, Sun Hu turned back to the river. However, Sun Hu only caught a few pieces of luggage and did not find his wife. At this time, Sun Hu suddenly heard Chen calling his name on the shore. "Sun Hu, come ashore quickly. There are crocodiles." Sun Hu was scared. He jumped and quickly swam to the shore. Under the dim light, a few snowflakes were faintly floating on the river. Sun Hu was anxious and wanted to go down the river to find Sun Hu's wife, but was caught by Chen. "You are going to die. There are 2 or 3 meter long crocodiles in the river. You will die if you take a bite." Looking at the gradually calm river surface, Sun Hu cried heartbreakingly. After Sun Hu cried by the river all night, Triley told Sun Hu that a total of 23 people died on their boat last night, and Sun Hu's wife was one of them. Then Chen urged Sun Hu to go to the refugee camp to ascend the throne as soon as possible. Sun Hu hysterically yelled at Chen, "My wife is still in the river. How can you let me bear to leave her alone to go to the refugee camp? I can't do it." Chen said coldly to Sun Hu, "Lion tracking is a life and death business, and it is normal for someone to die. I advised you not to come at the beginning, but you insisted on coming. This is your own choice. I'm leaving, and it's up to you whether you come or not." After saying that, Chen directly left Sun and walked towards the refugee camp. Looking at Chen back, Sun Hao felt a panic. He looked at the river, then looked at the hundreds of people around him who were walking the line, and slapped himself twice. "I'm sorry, my wife, but Run can't die here." Sun Hao picked up Run and quickened his pace to catch up with Chen. In the refugee camp in Panama, they filled out the entry information with the help of real police. Then, they took a boat to the refugee shelter in Panama as refugees. After the identity verification was completed, they were sent to the border between Panama and Costa Rica. Costa Rica doesn't care about illegal entry at all. After they got off the refugee bus in Panama, they waited for the bus to Costa Rica directly on the roadside. Half an hour later, they took the bus to the border between Costa Rica and Nicaragua. Entry into Nicaragua was also very smooth. Chen took them directly to the Immigration Bureau, and after giving the Immigration Bureau staff $150, they entered Nicaragua unimpeded. Sun Hu had never expected that she could enter a country without a legal entry visa. This was completely different from what Sun Hu imagined, being chased and blocked by border police. Chen told Sun Hu that they had 2 days of legal stay in Nicaragua and asked him to open a hotel and take Run to have a good sleep. Sun Hu slept until 4 o'clock in the afternoon of the next day. When he got up, he felt that the fatigue accumulated over the past few days was swept away, but he was always in a very sad mood. Then he thought of his wife who died in Panama, and he wanted to slap himself a few more times. At night, they set off for Honduras, but when they entered Honduras from Nicaragua, they were not so lucky. At 4 o'clock in the morning, when they just crossed the border of Nicaragua and arrived in Honduras, they were stopped by the Honduran border police. A total of 23 smugglers were stopped, including Chinese, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, and Haitians. However, the Honduran police only took the 3 Chinese to the camp to take photos unregistered and release the others on the spot. The Honduran police said that they stopped them because the Americans asked them to take photos of them. Later in the camp, the Honduran police pointed a gun at Sun, whose head and robbed him of the $500 he had just withdrawn from the bank, and then they were released. Sun, who went to withdraw some more money and continued to travel to El Salvador by car. The two countries of El Salvador and Guatemala passed very smoothly. Chinle took Sun directly to their local snakeheads and let them lead the way. They didn't even encounter the police along the way. It took 10 days to reach the border between Guatemala and Mexico City. Here is the last hurdle of the route, crossing the whole of Mexico. There are 2 ways to enter Mexico from Guatemala, either by motorcycle or by crossing the river. Chen Lei said that crossing the river was safe after all, so he took Sun to travel by water, also by boat. But this time they took a kayak with 4 or 5 people in one boat, and the current was also very stable, which was much safer than the previous boat tried in Panama. As a result, they were unlucky. When they crossed the river, they were caught by the Mexican border police, and more than a dozen people were sent to the Mexican Immigration Detention Center. When they were caught, Sun, who thought that everything was over and they would be deported back to China. In addition to being disappointed, Sun, who actually felt relieved. As a result, after arriving at the Immigration Detention Center, Chen Lei comforted Sun, who told him not to worry, and that they would be released after being detained for a while. Sun, who asked curiously, "Aren't we the smugglers sent back to China when we are caught by the border police? Deported back to China? Do you think this is a movie?" Chen Lei sneered and said, "Where's the money? It costs money to buy a plane ticket. Do you think the Mexican government has the money to buy you a plane ticket back to China? You're overthinking. Hide your valuables on your body and go in to have a good rest for a while." After they went through the formalities and entered the prison, they found that there were already many people living there. Most of them were Latin Americans from Central America and a few Chinese. Sun, who met 3 people from Shanxi, 1 from Hunan and there, but they didn't communicate much. In fact, the Chinese are the ones who like to cheat Chinese people the most outside, so they have to be on guard against their fellow countrymen. After spending 5 boring days, they were called to register their passport information, take photos for archiving, and were released that afternoon. After they came out, Chen Lei had already contacted a private car to take them straight to Mexico City, the capital of Mexico. After 2 days and 1 night, they finally arrived in Mexico City. After they came out, they first checked into a hotel and then went downstairs to eat together. After dinner, Sun, who just stood at the door of the restaurant. When she was checking out, heard Otter Run disappeared. Sun, who was completely panicked, and she was anxious to find Run everywhere on the street. "Where are you? Come out quickly. Dad is going to be angry." Sun, who had only one thought in his mind at the time, he had already lost his wife, and he must not lose his daughter again. There were many people on the streets of Mexico City, and Sun, who couldn't find his daughter Run at all. Jinlei saw Sun, who running fast in front of him, and hurriedly yelled at him from behind, "Sun, who, you are crazy. This is Mexico City. Don't run around." But Sun, who was only thinking about her daughter, and didn't listen to her call. Xu Huai chased after Sun, who was trying to hold her, but it was too late. A motorcycle suddenly rushed out from behind Sun, who knocked her to the ground. Sun, who was knocked unconscious, and before she could react, a pickup truck stopped next to her. Then, Sun, who felt a pain in the back of her head and fell into a coma. After waking up, Sun, who was in a dark room with more than a dozen men locked up. Sun, who began to feel scared, because Sun, who had experienced such a scene when she was in Panama. Sun, who was kidnapped again. Sun, who touched her pocket and there was no money in it. Not only that, Sun, who didn't know where Run was, and whether the people who kidnapped him and Sun, who were the same group. Thinking of Run and his wife, Sun, who couldn't help it anymore, and covered her face and cried out. The crying of Queen's son attracted the attention of other people in the room, but they did not make any other moves, just looked at Queen's son with indifferent eyes. In the darkness, there was no concept of time, and no one came in to deliver food. Queen's son did not know how long she had been here. She only knew that after she woke up after 3 naps, she was dragged out of the dark room by a man with a masked face and a gun. Later, Queen's son saw Chen Lei and nodded happily. After giving the man $200, he hurried over to support him. Sun, who looked at this scene and couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. It turned out that his life was only worth $200. Queen's son, who had not eaten for a long time, was actually in a state of exhaustion, but thinking of herd otter run, Queen's son did not know where she got the strength, broke free from Chen Lei's hands, and stood in front of the man. Daughter, my daughter, give my daughter back to me. Then, without any nonsense, the man shot Queen's son's right foot. Queen's son felt a piercing pain coming from her right foot and collapsed to the ground. After the man left, Chen Lei came back again. While carrying Sun Hu on his back, he complained, "Why did you mess with him? You are really sick." Sun Hu cried bitterly, unsaid through gritted teeth, "Chen Lei, my daughter is missing." Run, she is missing." Chen Lei paused, sighed and said, "Don't even think about it. A woman missing in Mexico City will make at least 8,000 a year, if not 10,000. He will probably never find Run that." Sun Hu screamed in pain again, but this time it was heartache. That night, Chen Hu to a black clinic. The doctor at the clinic said that he had to operate immediately after examining her. Fortunately, he still had anesthetics. After the operation, Chen Lei told Sun Hu that 3 of her toes were amputated, but Sun Hu no longer felt it was important. Sun Hu lay in the ward of the clinic and cried all night. After resting for 10 days, Chen Lei said he couldn't wait any longer and asked Sun Hu to follow him. After coming out of the clinic, Chen Lei bought a second-hand motorcycle. He carried Sun Hu and Sun Hu carried a small bag. They drove towards Mexicali. After driving on the straight Pan-American highway for 5 days, they finally arrived in Mexicali. Standing on the hilltop of Mexicali, they could already see the U.S.-Mexico border wall. After resting for a day in Mexicali, they rode to Tecate. Then they threw away the motorcycle and started climbing the mountain. Because Sun Hu had an injury on his foot, they climbed very slowly. It was not until the evening that they saw a very inconspicuous barbed wire. After walking through the barbed wire, Chen Lei patted Sun Hu on the shoulder and smiled at him. "Congratulations, brother. Now you are standing on American soil." Sun Hu looked at the desolate desert around him, thought of his wife and daughter, and burst into tears. Chen Lei helped Sun Hu walk to the side of a highway and then sat down with him. Sun Hu looked at the darkness around him, undashed in confusion. "What should we do next? There is no place to stay nearby." Chen Lei smiled and took out his mobile phone to surrender. Then Chen Lei called 91 in front of Sun Hu. Half an hour later, 2 police cars came in front of them, and 4 or 5 immigrants got off. The police began to search them and then took them to the Immigration Bureau. After a night of questioning, at 8 o'clock the next morning, they received their documents and got on a bus full of illegal immigrants who came with them. After another 3 days of driving, they got off the bus on a very busy street. The streets on both sides were very luxurious and atmospheric buildings. Sun Hu, welcome to Washington, D.C. The house in front of you is the official residence of the Vice President of the United States. How about it? It's magnificent, right? Chen Lei patted his granddaughter on the shoulder and said, "Okay, transfer the road expenses to me as soon as possible. 2 adults and 1 child, a total of $8,000. Let's keep in touch when we have time in the United States in the future." Chen Lei waved his hand and turned to walk towards the bustling street behind him. Sun Hu stood on the street in the United States, looking at the prosperous scene before him and thinking of his lost wife and daughter, feeling at a loss.